What we're going to do for the next 50 minutes or so is we're going to talk a little bit about metrics, and we're going to try to take a little bit deeper dive into the value proposition that you've all started, right? So we have a pretty good start, but we need to drive to the next level. And that's really what this is intended to do. So we're going to do about 20, 25 minutes on just some content, try to present some new concepts, and you're going to be going back to your boards, working on value proposition, taking it to the next level. Okay, make sense? And then I think we've got one more session, and I think we're finished for the day after some wrap up. So just to kind of check in and give you the scoop. All right. So let's talk about metrics. So I've relabeled this session from metrics that matter to metrics, understanding what your customers' metrics are and why that matters as it relates to your value proposition. So what matters most to your customers, and how are you aligned, or is your product, solution, service aligned to deliver towards those metrics? Okay. It gets back to this concept of understanding a day in the life of your customer. What do they really care about? What do they really need? Okay. So historically, you've used a business plan, right, to start a business. And we've already talked about the fact that that's dead, that's gone, right? That you're not going to use an income statement, a balance sheet, cash flow to really understand what's happening in a market and evolve as rapidly as you need to. Those are really lagging indicators, right? The revenue you booked last quarter isn't very relevant to where should you head going forward. The Steve story, right, talked about that rapid innovation and the rapid pivot, and we'd argue that these financials are not it, right? So Steve Blank's methodology really talks to kind of the business side metrics that you'd want to take a look at, right? And instead of looking at, say, last quarter's financials, you might want to look at something like customer acquisition cost, right? Is that improving? Is it going down, et cetera? So if you're Shine On and you decide I want to go direct to market and I'm going to start selling my product on Instagram, right? What's happening? Are you seeing the throughput, the click rate? How is that sort of overall trending? So that's one kind of component of metrics that you want to take a look at. We're not going to talk about that at all today. We're going to dive into specifically value proposition about the customer. So it's not about your product or your idea. And so far what we've really discussed in the value proposition is that sort of, who are you selling to, what utility are they getting, et cetera. And that's important about important to get to the right value proposition, but we're going to take it a level deeper, okay? And so the question is, ultimately, what is it going to take to get customers to change, right? As humans, we don't like change, even though it's the only constant in life. And I've once heard from a mentor of mine that it takes a 10x improvement before someone's going to be willing to change, right? So I moved from cars to flying, right? It takes me 13 hours to drive from Denver to Minneapolis. I can fly there in an hour, right? There's a pretty big time and cost savings. Now, that's not universally true, right? There can be other subtleties that would sort of cause that. But that's certainly one of the things that you're going to want to understand. And you're going to want to understand that based on what's important to the client. And the only way you're going to do that is by digging in, okay? So we've already shared this as a way to sort of think about a scale. So just show of hands, you've already been exposed to this. How many of you think you have a vague future ailment in terms of your value proposition? It's not critical, really, nobody. I mean, there's millions. It's not a problem to be a vague future ailment. I mean, there's billions of dollars sold every year in supplements, in multivitamins that I keep reading we don't need to take, but I take anyway, right? I mean, so that's not an issue, right? So nobody has a vague future ailment here. No one? No one? I'm just going to let this sit here for a minute so we can just kind of think about it. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think we've even in our customer discovery interviews said in the world of engagement, we heard yesterday that citizen science is a nice to have, but customer engagement that actually focuses on livelihoods, gentrification, community needs, way better engagement than citizen science, for example. So
okay.
It's a nice to have.
Yep.
As a counterpoint, as their mentor, I would argue we just need to hone our message a bit and make the pain more real to the people because they don't realize how bad it is today.
Sure, I mean, if you could make the argument that, like, look, we're losing, I don't know, pollinators, right? Butterflies and whatever at, astronomical rates, and if we can't pollinate, we can't actually grow food, and if we don't grow food, we're all gonna die. All right, so I would argue that's probably not gonna happen in the next, like, day, week, year, month, couple of years, decade. Like, when does that actually happen? So, that feels very different than maybe, sort of a shark bite need, right? So to me, a shark bite need is when we went through the financial crisis, right? So we were within, you can read articles, you can understand history on this, right? Maybe a little differently, but we were within days of having really, really catastrophic events. I mean, we did have catastrophic events, but if we would have had widespread bank failures, what would have happened, right? There was definitely a sense of urgency and a need at a very macro level to sort of solve this type of thing, right? All right, so how many of you think you have a shark bite? Truly have if my customer does not end up having my solution, right, they're going out of business. They're gonna lose the competition. Okay, you have a shark bite?
I mean, if you're not seen by a car and a car hits you, I'd say that's a pretty life-threatening possibility.
Okay, that's pretty life-threatening. I mean, how many millions of miles are ridden every day in commuters where there is not a car accident? Right?
Yeah, but it only matters for you, the customer. It doesn't matter for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, look, we could do risk analysis on severity of the outcome versus probability of the outcome, right? And we can talk about that all day long, right? And so, to your argument, right, the consequence is really severe if you get hit by a car. The likelihood, I don't know. I mean, what's that ratio?
What's interesting about that, though, is that there probably are folks out there for whom having the right lighting is a shark bite incident, either because of the life experience they've already had, or they've been hit or nearly hit, or they've known someone who's been hit or
Gene is stealing my thunder. No, you're fine. Keep going. This is good.
So it really is about finding the specific customers for whom it's most like a shark bite, because there's lots of ways to not be hit by cars. So for most people, having the backlight, light is nice to have.
Okay, go ahead.
Relatedly, yesterday there was a slide that says context matters.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the key here. Is there was some urgent shark bite nature to some of even our work in some cases for some people.
Sure.
Very specific context.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of depends.
Okay, so let me ask the last question. How many of you have a mosquito bite? Okay, so most of you haven't put your hand up. You got to be something. These are your options. What are we missing?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I feel like some of the companies in here, like for example the battery or like Arpeggio, in 6 to 7 years they may become even more of a shark bite. Like
Sure.
if they don't exist in the world down the line, it's going to be even more of a problem. Do you consider that a shark bite, or do you no one's dying today because of it, but if the future's going towards batteries, that's going to matter a lot more. Cancer is becoming more prevalent, that's going to matter. Drug discovery.
Yeah, I mean, all of this needs to be taken into context. So let me answer your question in just a minute.
Well, that's, I guess, the question. Are we talking about this from the standpoint of specific customers or from the standpoint of society? Because they're hugely
Yes.
different. In our case, it might be, and I don't know, but the Nori guys might say, hey, if you guys go away, that's kind of a shark bite for us.
Uh-huh.
We really see you guys as essential partners.
Yep.
But then on the other hand, for society, well, I don't know. I don't think, Nori or us, nobody single-handedly is saving the world. Does it really matter if they go away? If we go away, something else will happen. So you could argue, well, we're maybe at best a mosquito bite for society.
Yep.
Because nobody's that essential, right, necessarily. But for a specific customer, you might be very essential.
So sales and salespeople are not just, hey, take people out to dinner and enjoy, time out hanging out with people, right? This is what good salespeople do. They make things that are vague future ailments into shark bites, right? They find that lever and they go and they apply pressure to it, right? And they find ways to make things, and it, in some cases, in its purest form, it feels sort of slimy. It's you kind of get that used car sales, mall jeweler. I mean, there's lots of examples of places where it's sort of misused, okay? But the point I'm trying to make here is you're all right? So the context, the way it's framed, and the position you are in the market or in the ecosystem really can change your perspective on whether it's a shark bite or a vague future ailment, right? So all of those things need to come into account, but the most important thing is that you understand the specific archetype and the specific person to whom you're trying to sell, what they care about, and figure out where you sit in that space. It matters for more than just whether you have a value proposition or not, right? It matters as it relates to your ability to figure out the timing or the priority of which segments you go after first, right? We just heard Steve talk about pivots. So how do you decide, especially if you're a platform technology and you don't know where to go yet, how do you decide where the low-hanging fruit is? You can use this type of analysis to sort of drive in and get to that, and that's a big part of what we're going to try to do with the exercise, okay? So the context, the time frame, where you sit, all of those things are important, and that's why I wanted to sort of just take a minute to tease this out, having introduced this at a very high level before. Because you look at this and you go, okay, yeah, I get a concept, where do I fall? But it's actually a lot more complicated than that. It's multidimensional, okay? So as you remember, a value proposition needs to describe the specific quantitative benefit to your customer, right? If you had to say off the top of your head, of the presentations we saw this morning, what percentage contained a specific quantitative metric in the value proposition? A quarter? Half? What else? 30%? So I didn't keep track of numbers and write it down, but I'd say we were, a third-ish, maybe. Gene, do you agree with that?
About a third-ish, yeah.
Can we get sort of comfortable with a third-ish? Okay. Yeah. And so of the third of the teams that had a metric, how many of those do you believe were actually real and nailed down and not a hypothesis? Probably 0, right? You've conducted effectively 2 customer interviews. You have a little head start, I think, but in general, we still have a lot of work to do there, and that's what the session's designed to do. So by the end of the session, what I'm hoping is that we can get to a value proposition based on something that's going on with your customer, even if it's a hypothesis at this point. I would rather you say X% or X dollars. Make up a number. If you think it's 10 million, great. Put down 10 million and then go test it. Gene.
And the make up the number part has got 2 pieces to it. It's helpful to make up the number because then you can test, because we talked about it takes a certain magnitude of improvement before folks will make change. So you need to understand whether it's a 10% or 110% kind of improvement. And then, if you actually don't know what your product attributes are yet, you could design it to do the 110% if that's what the market requires. So the making up a number thing is not really just a make up a number to have a number. It
Right.
actually is make up a number in order to test it. Both test whether or not the efficacy of your product would ever meet it, and test whether or not it's threshold enough that a customer would actually have a preference for your performance because of that. You surpassed the threshold.
I'm curious about that because you're starting with the number you're making up, and you're testing whether your made-up number sounds reasonable to your customer.
But you don't ask it as that number. You don't say, hey, how about if I could save you 10 million a year, how would that feel, right? You use it, Gene asked, I think, a great question, which was if you could design a solution, what would that look like today? And they design it, right? And they tell you, oh, I'd love it to do this and this and this. And you go, wow, that sounds like that'd be a lot of work. It sounds very different than what you see today. What do you think something like that would cost?
I guess my problem is I still feel like I'm not dishonest, but you're still just making a number up.
You're anchoring for sure.
There's no empirical way to test that.
But
Right.
you're only using that number as a comparison. So if you think the number's 30%, and then you go out and listen to folks and they tell you it's 100%, it's really important information, because your product performance is actually only a 10% benefit.
So we're asking you to sort of flip the traditional sort of here's a bunch of supporting evidence, and based on that, then these things must be true, and based on that, then this must be the number. I'm asking you to flip that upside down and just pick a number and say, I think it's 30%, now let me go and build the supporting evidence to see whether that hangs together or not, right? And part of the reason to do that is because it's going to increase, and you're going to know the right questions to ask and the things you want to get after, and you're also going to start to learn more quickly than trying to build all the evidence. Because you could build evidence that's sort of frankly irrelevant to getting to that number if you're not sort of picking a number.
Basically to move you out of the assumption that lower cost is better.
Right.
And get you to the assumption of X% lower cost is essential to have a customer make a change.
And I think the distinction where your concern is you're not going to these meetings and saying, I think I can save 30%. You're thinking in your mind, I think I can save 30% and ask questions and see if I'm right. So it's not that you're giving out this information, it's just not like you're working with me.
Tell me how you do it today. What would it take for you to change to something different? And have them tell you.
Steve's business is growing, even though his ink is 3 times more expensive than what it's replacing. So it's not just cost.
Oh, absolutely. That's why it's metrics. We just
Right.
use cost 'cause
And we're just using that as an example for now. And that's actually, the point Gene just made relates to yours, which is, I would challenge you to not try to compete on cost. That's like this cost plus pricing approach is not what you want to do, right? You want to say, well, it cost me $30, let's see, my markup is da-da-da, okay, boom. You're actually negotiating against yourself. If your cost plus a 30% markup is $50, but the market's willing to pay $5,000, wouldn't you rather get $5,000 for it, at least short term? Sure, right? Andy, did you have something? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Well, just relatedly, I think one of the things we're learning through this is thinking this through is you have to have the right metric, not just, so you have to make up the right number for the right statistic. So like if our volunteers are using a mobile app to enter data and it goes straight into a cloud-based system, and then they used to fill out paper data sheets, physically walk them over to the coordinator.
Yep.
The coordinator then enters them into a spreadsheet. It might be time, right? Time
Yep.
savings. And so I think we need to think about it as far as the right metric.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do. It's like I told you to say that. That's exactly what we're trying to do in this session, right? That's right. We literally are going to try to take now, again, concepts you've been introduced to, we're going to try to take these and start to break them down into that specific level of, okay, great, what does this cost you, right? What is the specific thing that's happening in your customer's day-to-day workflow? And they say, geez, it's taking me like 20 hours a week to manage volunteers across 5 states to do what I'm trying to do. How am I going to find a way to make that simpler, cheaper, whatever? What if I came back to you and said, you don't have to touch it at all. I'm going to hire a whole group of people. They're going to sit in India. They're going to manage all the people and do all that work, and it costs you $100,000 a year. And they go, wait a minute, there's no way I have $100,000. Like my budget's like $30,000 total, right? So then that's not a solution. So understanding that workflow and understanding sort of what we're doing is building on the ecosystem component that Gene just talked about, but we're taking it down to the level of the customer. And we're going to try to dig into these things, right? Money, time, emotion, and risk. I'm going to break this out into a little bit more detail in the next 2 slides, but let me ask you this question. Why does anybody drive any other vehicle besides the least expensive front-wheel drive vehicle in the market? I mean, it's a utility thing, right? Like, I had to get from my house to here. That's literally the utility that I needed with my vehicle.
Sometimes you wish I come back.
Oh, yeah, sometimes I do, right? So all of a sudden you start to add these other things, right? So why is why do we make what am I looking for? I don't know, a 2-door red Ferrari. Why is that a thing? Why is that a product that people buy? Okay. All right, so it's cool. So who cares about that? Why am I going to pay $200,000 for cool? Because of ego, okay? Why do I care about my ego? I'm not going to take this all the way to root cause because everything boils down to a couple things we were just kind of skip. But you understand the point I'm trying to make, right? And so as we look at going beyond this list, right, I went through and basically tried to categorize a number of different types of value propositions, things that have quantitative, I would argue, that ultimately can become quantitative, right? But could you not look at something, so as we talk about on this slide here, right, emotion and risk. So we're kind of breaking out the emotion and risk components. So convenience, am I willing to pay for convenience when I pay more money per mile to get an Uber than I do to drive my own vehicle, or to walk, or to take my bike even though it's 2 miles away? Am I not getting wet when it's raining out because I'm doing that, but I'm willing to pay for the convenience of not being wet when I show up at my meeting or my interview? 100%. So what's that worth to me, right? What's the reliability of a product's, what is that, how do I quantitate that in a particular situation, right? There's some sort of fear around the reliability of a product line, right? When I get on an airplane and it takes off, pretty concerned about reliability at that point. Okay, here's another set, right? Compatibility with my existing things. Why did I buy the 4K TV with the special connector and the whatever? Because it was the only TV that allowed me to connect with my other peripherals and the things that I wanted to connect to. Right?
So these are taking the time, risk, emotion categories and really loading them up.
Yep.
Compatibility, it's an emotion and time thing. I don't have to spend my energy, emotion, and my time figuring it out if I got it. So it's taking those 4 categories and really getting into the details of how does it manifest itself for that customer.
So, here's an example. This weekend I was painting a kid's bedroom. Got a doorbell rang, went downstairs, answered the doorbell, paint all over, right? And there was a, 20-year-old going door to door selling pest services. I currently have pest services at my house. And the service that was being offered was included a bunch of things that I wasn't receiving currently, right? So ended up signing a contract saying, hey, this looks great, but I want a contingency that if I can't cancel my other pest contract, I want to be able to get out of this one, right? Call the other pest company that's currently been a provider for 9 years. They say, hey, look, we're going to drop your prices, we're going to give you those same services, and we're not going to have you sign up for a commitment, right? I still ended up paying a little bit more than I would have with the new contract, but I was willing to stay with them because I didn't have a commitment. Whereas with the new company, I would have ended up with a commitment, right? So when I think about the sort of like, as I look at terms up here as an example, right? I made a choice and paid more for terms because I had convenience of being able to get out of that contract whenever I wanted to. I don't know if I'm going to live in that house for a year. Did I want to take it with me? Maybe I moved to a place where I didn't have as much of a pest issue, right? Things like that. So people find utility in all of these different areas, and I just wanted to expose some categories, not to say you need to think of every single one of these categories for all of your things. What I want you to do is actually start with the foundational day-to-day, what are the challenges and issues and the things that they physically, what are the jobs that they have to do, your customer is going to have to do. And from those jobs, I want you to start to extract and think about it in terms of this, not just the time and the cost component of it, okay? So let me just give you an example. So I've already mentioned that I ran an air conditioning company and we were selling to data centers, okay? So as we looked at trying to figure out how to price to data centers, we actually found that they were basically, they'd pay anything that we wanted them to pay as long as there was an ROI over like a 3 to 5 year time period, with the exception of some willing to pay even more than that, right? And so we thought, well, why don't we go find the low-hanging fruit? So I've already mentioned that as we started to kind of study this, we figured out that data centers were paying as much to cool the data centers as they were to run the servers, right? So how do we start to look at things like what was the demand by season? So in certain locations, right, if you have a data center in California, electricity is really challenging in the summertime. What were their demand prices? How did they sort of deal with that? Were they willing to just offset during the summer? Was that a market that we could go after? How could we actually enhance our value proposition to them and sell to them based on that, right? What about by day? What if we were able to shift some of their load during the day to at night because of the rates that they were paying with utility? What if they were trying to generate their own electricity on site and trying to deal with that, right? The other thing we found was there are different tiers of data centers. So some data centers can be offline or they can have some kind of an impact for a number of hours a year. Some of them couldn't tolerate any time out of offline at all. 0 time off, right? 0 downtime. Do you know what they were willing to pay for backups? Do you know what they were willing to consider in terms of what they had to do to make sure that they never went offline and that they never had an interruption in service? I mean, we're talking, tens of millions of dollars in just reliability, things that they never turned on. They actually rarely used it. They'd run it twice a year just to make sure that it still worked. But they had to make sure if the grid went down that they were ready to go, right? And then there was another component of it, which was the new business or green initiatives, right? So a bunch of data centers said, well, wait a minute, this is actually a pretty energy intensive thing. We can actually attract clients that are trying to be green if we can sort of green up how we do what we do. And that's going to be a way for us to differentiate ourselves. And we found clients willing to buy products from us simply because of that new sales component. They actually were worried about our reliability. They're like, we're going to stay connected to the grid. We'll bring you guys on. We'll do some stuff we're going to keep the traditional air conditioners as well. But we're going to use this as a sales opportunity. And so we were able to enhance the value proposition specifically to that sort of sub-segment, right? So I'm just bringing this up as a couple of examples in which, and where we were able to sort of identify that, if they were able to attract more clients, well, what was the value to that business? And if that generated $30 million, right, we could say, great, we'll just take 10% of the new stuff you generate, we're good, right? And so that's what I'm asking you to do, is break down your market segments, try to dig in and really understand what they're doing day to day, and then start to sort of tease that out using some of these items that are up here, okay? Try to quantify it as much as you can and see where you can get, see how far that can take you. But ideally, by the next time you present, you've got a quantifiable value proposition. This is, by the way, the time to pick a segment. So if you're still kind of not sure, whatever, just pick one, because you're going to get the learning out of it. You can always use it on the next one down the road, okay? Questions about any of this? Clear about what you're going to do? All right, so get together with your team, head back to your value proposition planning board, whatnot, and let's go ahead and get started. We'll be wandering around, and in about, we're taking about 15 minutes, and then we're going to do some reporting back in terms of like what you sort of discovered or pulled out of this exercise, okay?